imminent threat from Iran's nuclear program, while also announcing a domestic state of emergency. According to the IDF, over 200 Israeli Air Force aircraft were involved in the opening strikes, dropping over 330 munitions on some 100 targets. Multiple nuclear installations were struck, including in Natanz, one of the central sites of Iran's nuclear program. In a video message, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Israeli forces also attacked Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and top Iranian nuclear scientists. He stated that the attacks were intended to ward off an existential threat, vowing that the battle would continue for, and I quote, as many days as it takes, end quote. The impact of these attacks has already been felt throughout the region, with neighboring countries closing their airspace and putting their security forces on high alert. The Houthis have reportedly launched missiles toward Israel, one of which has hit the occupied West Bank, causing injuries. Many regional leaders have condemned the attack as a flagrant violation of international law and an escalation that is pushing the region toward more conflict and tension. According to Iran's state media and statements made by Iran's supreme leader today, at least 4 top Iranian generals and 3 leading nuclear scientists were killed. A number of civilians have also been reportedly killed and injured. The supreme leader has promised severe punishment, and I quote, for Israel. Madam President, I reaffirm the Secretary General's condemnation of any military escalation in the Middle East. I also underline the obligation of member states not to use force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, and in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. I reiterate the call by the Secretary General to both sides to show maximum restraint at this critical moment and to avoid at all costs a descent into deeper and wider regional conflict. Of particular concern is the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. It has been reported that the Natanz enrichment complex, which houses both the fuel enrichment plant and the pilot fuel enrichment plant, suffered significant damage, including centrifuge cascade calls. The International Atomic Energy Agency resolution, adopted on 12 June, calls on Iran to meet its legal obligations and to fully cooperate with the IAEA to urgently remedy its non-compliance with its safeguards agreement. Finally, the latest dangerous escalation follows some significant diplomatic developments. Talks between Iran and the U.S. were to resume in Oman this weekend. I encourage such diplomatic efforts to continue. A peaceful resolution through negotiations remains the best means to ensure the inclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. We must, at all costs, avoid a growing conflagration that would have enormous global consequences. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Rafael Grossi.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Under Secretary General and dear colleagues. It is a pleasure for us to be able to contribute to this very important debate today. Early this morning, the IAEA was informed of the military operation launched by Israel, which includes, as Undersecretary General DiCarlo was just informing, which includes attacks on nuclear facilities in the Islamic Republic of Iran. As I reported this morning to the IAEA Board of Governors, we have been in permanent contact with the Iran Nuclear Regulatory Authority to ascertain the status of relevant nuclear facilities and to assess any wider impacts on nuclear safety and security. Iran confirmed that initially only the Natanz fuel enrichment plant had been attacked in today's strikes. This facility contains the fuel enrichment plant and the pilot fuel enrichment plant. At Natanz, the above ground part of the pilot fuel enrichment plant, where Iran was producing uranium enriched up to 60% uranium-235, has been destroyed. Electricity infrastructure at the facility, an electrical substation, main electric power supply building, emergency power supply, and backup generators have also been destroyed. There is no indication of a physical attack on the underground cascade hall containing part of the pilot fuel enrichment plant and the main fuel enrichment plant. However, the loss of power to the cascade may have damaged the centrifuges there. The level of radioactivity outside the Natanz site has remained unchanged and at normal levels, indicating no external radiological impact to the population or the environment from this event. However, due to the impacts, there is radiological and chemical contamination inside the facilities at Natanz. The type of radiation present inside the facility, primarily alpha particles, is manageable with appropriate radiation protection measures. At present, the Iranian authorities are informing us of attacks on two other facilities, namely the Fordo fuel enrichment plant and at Isfahan, where fuel plate fabrication plant, a fuel manufacturing plant, a uranium conversion facility, and an enriched UO2 powder plant are located. However, Madam President, I have to inform that at this moment, we do not have enough information beyond indicating that military activity has been taken place around these facilities as well, which initially had not, I repeat, had not been part of the military operation. But now there is enough information for me to say to you that these facilities are also concerned. All these developments, Madam President and dear colleagues, are deeply concerning. I have repeatedly stated that nuclear facilities must never be attacked, regardless of the context or circumstances, as it could harm both people and the environment. Such attacks have serious implications for nuclear security, nuclear safety, and safeguards, as well as regional and international peace and security. In this regard, as I also reminded the Board of Governors of the IAEA, there are numerous General Conference resolutions on the topic of military attacks against nuclear facilities, in particular resolutions General Conference 444 or 533, which indicated that any armed attack and threat against nuclear facilities devoted to peaceful purposes is a violation of the principles of the Charter, international law, and the statute of the agency. Madam President, dear colleagues, as Director General of the IAEA and consistent with the objectives of the IAEA and our statute, I call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint to avoid further escalation. I reiterate that any military action that jeopardizes safety and security of nuclear facilities risk grave consequences for the people of Iran, the region, and beyond. You were evoking, or Madam Undersecretary General was evoking, that yesterday the Board of Governors of the IAEA adopted an important resolution on Iran's safeguards obligations. But in addition to this, the Board resolution stressed its support for a diplomatic solution to the problems posed by the Iranian nuclear program. The IAEA continues to monitor the situation closely. Our Incident and Emergency Center has maintained continuous contact with Iranian authorities from the onset of the attack, regularly confirming the status of the facilities, and will continue to do so in the coming days. Additionally, we have established a task force comprising several senior staff members to monitor the situation closely over the next few days, and they will be available 24/7, of course, at the disposal of the United Nations Security Council, as it should be. The IAEA stands ready to provide technical assistance and remains committed to its nuclear safety, security, and safeguards mandate in all circumstances. I stand ready to engage with all relevant parties to help ensure the protection of nuclear facilities and the continued peaceful use of nuclear technology in accordance with our mandate, including deploying agency nuclear security and safety experts, in addition to our safeguards inspectors already present in Iran, wherever necessary, to ensure that nuclear installations are fully protected and continue to be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. As I informed today the IAEA Board of Governors, Madam President, I have indicated to the respective authorities my readiness to travel at the earliest to assess the situation and ensure safety, security, and non-proliferation in Iran. I have also been in contact with our inspectors in Iran and Israel. The safety of our staff is, of course, of paramount importance. All necessary actions are being taken to ensure they are not harmed. Despite the current military actions and heightened tensions, it is clear that the only sustainable path forward for Iran, for Israel, the entire region, and the international community is one grounded in dialogue and diplomacy to ensure peace, stability, and cooperation. The IAEA, as the international technical institution entrusted with overseeing the peaceful use of nuclear energy, remains a unique and vital forum for dialogue, especially now. In accordance with its statute and long-standing mandate, the IAEA provides the framework and natural platform where facts prevail over rhetoric and where engagement can replace escalation. I reaffirm my personal and the agency's readiness to facilitate technical discussions and support efforts that promote transparency, safety, security, and the peaceful resolution of nuclear-related issues in Iran. I thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank Mr. Grossi for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Госпожа председатель,
Madam President,
благодарим
we
заместителя
would like to thank
генерального
the
секретаря ООН
Undersecretary General
по политическим
for
вопросам
Political Affairs,
и миростроительству Rosemary DiCarlo,
Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. We
генерального
thank Ms.
директора
DiCarlo
МАГАТЭ
and the
Rafael
Director
Grossi за их
General of the
доклад.
IAEA, Ms. Grossi. We thank them for their briefings.
Прежде всего, хотели
First of
бы
all,
выразить
we
соболезнования
would like
руководству
to express
и народу
our
Исламской Республики
condolences
Иран
to the leadership and the
в
people
связи
of
с
the Islamic
многочисленными
Republic of
человеческими жертвами,
Iran, having
в
to do
том
with the
числе среди мирных
numerous
жителей в
victims,
результате израильских ударов.
including amongst civilians, which were the result of Israeli action.
На наших глазах из-за
In front of
действий
our
Израиля
eyes, because of
происходит
Israeli
крайне опасная
action,
эскалация
what
в
is happening is a very
ближневосточном регионе,
dangerous
которая
escalation in the Middle
требует
East
неотложного
region,
внимания
and this
Совета.
is something that requires an immediate attention from this Council.
Признательны
We are
Гаянскому
grateful
председательству
to
за
the
оперативный
Guyana
созыв данного
presidency for
заседания.
convening this meeting of ours so
Симптоматично, что
expeditiously.
изначально
It's
Совет
symptomatic
должен был
that
рассмотреть
initially the
сегодня, ровно в
Council
это время,
was to consider today, at
гуманитарные
this very
последствия
time, the humanitarian
антигуманных действий
consequences
Израиля
of
против жителей
inhumane
сектора Газа.
actions by Israel against the people in the Gaza Strip.
Вместо этого мы
Instead
вынуждены
of
обсуждать
that,
новую,
we are
опаснейшую
here
и
having to discuss a
безответственную
new,
авантюру
most
Западного
dangerous
Иерусалима в
and
регионе,
irresponsible
на
adventure
этот раз
by
еще и
West Jerusalem
подталкивающий
in the region,
регион
but this
в
time
масштабы
it is also
ядерной
pushing the region
катастрофы.
to a large-scale nuclear
В
catastrophe.
ночь на 13
In the
июня
early
Израиль
hours of the
нанес
13th
серию
of June,
масштабных ударов по
Israel
территории Исламской
delivered
Республики
a
Иран.
number of extensive strikes
Под
against the
атакой
territory of the Islamic
оказались спящие
Republic of
города,
Iran.
гражданская
Peaceful
инфраструктура,
sleeping
а
cities
также
were
мирные
struck,
ядерные
civilian
объекты,
infrastructure,
находящиеся
and
под
peaceful nuclear
гарантией
installations
Международного
under
агентства по атомной энергии.
IAEA safeguards.
От докладчиков
We
мы услышали
heard
о
from the
жертвах среди
briefers
мирного
today
населения.
that there have been victims
Это
amongst
ничем не
civilians.
спровоцированная
This
атака,
completely
как бы Израиль
unprovoked
не
attack,
утверждал
no
обратное,
matter what
представляет
Israel
собой
says to
грубое
the
нарушение
contrary,
устава
is a gross
ООН и норм
violation of the
международного
UN
права.
Charter and international law.
Создается
One
впечатление,
is
что
left with the
руководство
impression that
Израиля
the
убеждено,
leadership
что у
of
него есть
Israel is
полная свобода
convinced
рук в
that they have
регионе
completely
и,
free
видимо,
hand in the
полагает, что
region, and
Израиль
they
может
probably
попирать
think
все
that
правовые
Israel
основы
can flout
и
any
подменять
legal
собой
norms
все
and
международные
replace
структуры,
all
включая
international
Совет
bodies,
Безопасности ООН и
including the
МАГАТЭ.
Security Council and IAEA.
Российская
The
Федерация
Russian
решительно осуждает
Federation
эту акцию
strongly
Западного
condemns
Иерусалима.
this action by West
Его военные
Jerusalem.
авантюры
West
толкают регион
Jerusalem's
на грань
military
большой
adventure
войны.
pushes the region to the brink of a
Ответственность за
large-scale
все
war,
и
and the
последствия этих
responsibility for
действий
all
всецело
of the
ложится
consequences
на
of these
израильское
actions
руководство
lies
и тех, кто
fully
его
with the
поощряет.
Israeli leadership and those who
Особую
encourage
тревогу
them.
вызывают
We are
возможные
particularly
радиологические
concerned by the
последствия
potential
поражения
radiological
ядерных объектов.
consequences of hitting nuclear installations.
Наша страна на
My
протяжении
country
целого ряда лет
has for a
предупреждала
number
о
of years been
неприемлемости силового
warning
решения
and
вопросов
saying that trying to
вокруг
resolve
иранской
by
ядерной
force
программы,
the issues surrounding
которая
the
может повлечь за
Iran
собой
nuclear
тяжелейшие
program are
последствия не только
unacceptable
для
as they
региона
can lead to the
Ближнего
most
Востока,
dire
но и для
consequences,
всего
not
мира.
just the Middle East region, but for the world as a whole.
Однако эти
But
призывы не были
these calls
услышаны,
of
и
ours
сейчас
were not
ситуация
heeded,
развивается
and the
по
situation
самому
is now following the
негативному
most
и
negative and
непредсказуемому сценарию.
unpredictable scenario.
Госпожа
Madam
председатель,
President,
действия Израиля
Israeli
направлены на
actions are
подрыв
aimed at
осуществляемых сейчас в различных
undermining
форматах
the
переговорных
various
усилий по
negotiating
поиску
efforts
решений
underway
в целях
now,
снижения
the
напряженности
efforts
вокруг иранской
to
мирной
lower
ядерной
the
программы.
tensions surrounding the Iran's
Пока весь
peaceful
мир
nuclear
с
program.
надеждой
The
ждет
whole
итогов
world is looking with
очередного
hope for the
раунда
outcome of yet
непрямых
another
контактов
round
между
of
Ираном и
indirect
США,
contacts between
ранее
Iran and the United
запланированных на
States, and they were
15 июня,
planned for the 15th of
Израиль
June.
решил их предвосхитить в
Israel
нужном
decided
ему
to
ключе
preempt
и
this in
начал
the way they
бомбить
deemed
ядерную
necessary and started
энергетическую
bombing the
инфраструктуру
nuclear and
Ирана,
energy infrastructure
демонстрируя
in Iran,
пренебрежение
showing
к
this way their
законам, нормам,
contempt for laws,
договоренностям,
norms, agreements,
правилам,
rules,
всему тому, что создает
everything
основу
that is the basis
цивилизованного
for a
взаимодействия между
civilized
государствами.
interaction between states.
Однако ответственность за
But the
произошедшее лежит не только
responsibility
на
for what
государстве
happened
Израиль,
is not
но
just
и
with
на
the state
его
of Israel,
ближайших
but
союзников.
also on its closest allies.
Это прямое
This is
следствие
a direct
попустительства
consequence
западных
of
стран,
Western
которые
countries'
месяцами,
acquiescence, who
сознательно
for
и
months,
методично
knowingly and
раскручивали
methodically
антииранскую
pumped up
истерию как в
anti-Iran
Совете
hysteria
Безопасности
in
ООН,
the UN
так и
Security
в Совете
Council and
управляющих
in the
МАГАТЭ.
Board of Governors of IAEA.
Эти государства
The
даже не
states
пытались найти
didn't even
конструктивное
try to come
решение
up with a
кризиса
constructive
вокруг
solution to the
совместного
crisis
всеобъемлющего плана
surrounding the
действий
Joint
и
Comprehensive Plan of
одобрившие его
Action
резолюции Совета
and the
Безопасности
Security Council Resolution
2231.
2231, which endorsed it.
Их задача
Their goal was
состояла в
completely
другом.
different.
Любым
It was
способом
to
надавить на
put
Иран,
pressure on Iran and in any way
изображая его
possible to
источником
paint
всех бед в
Iran as the
регионе
source of all
и
the trouble in the
безосновательно
region and to
представляя
baselessly
ответные легитимные
present
шаги
the
Тегерана в виде
reciprocal
задействования
legitimate
защитных
steps by
механизмов,
Tehran
предусмотренных
when they try to
СПГ, как
trigger the
нарушение
protection
обязательств
mechanisms
в
in
сфере
JCPOA
нераспространения.
as violating the obligations under non-proliferation.
Иранцы при этом
The
годами
Iranians
терпели
took
и не
this for
отказывались ни от
years
взаимодействия
and
с
did
МАГАТЭ,
not
ни от
reject
диалога в
interacting with
целях
IAEA,
нащупывания
nor did did move
переговорных
away
развязок.
from a dialogue so as to find
Хотим
negotiated
напомнить,
solutions. I would like to
и
recall
этот факт
here,
сейчас имеет
and this is
принципиальное
of principal
значение,
importance
что все
now,
проблемы
that
вокруг
all of the
СВПД
issues having to do
начались
with
из-за одностороннего выхода
JCPOA
Соединенных Штатов
began when the
из
United
ядерной
States
сделки в
unilaterally left
2018
the nuclear
году,
deal in
а также
2018.
принципиального
And
нежелания
also because of the
Великобритании,
principled
Франции и Германии
unwillingness by the UK, France,
выполнить
and
их
Germany to comply with the obligations they have under JCPOA, including to create the conditions for Tehran to receive the material yield from the lifting of unilateral sanctions by the EU in force until 2015. And later, they even went so far as to resume unilateral sanctions, which runs counter to Article 25 of the Charter. The European Union also joined in with pressure, disregarding thus their duty of impartial coordinator of the joint JCPOA Commission. The most egregious example was what happened in Vienna yesterday. Yet another biased and divorced from reality resolution passed by the Board of Governors of IAEA, which talks about some trumped-up threats to international peace and security from the Iran nuclear program. And this happened despite the fact that Iran is strictly complying with its obligations under NPT and under the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreements. And despite the fact that Iran remains the most inspected IAEA state, and the reports of IAEA Secretariat state clearly that there is no non-proliferation risk. In other words, the Western participants to the JCPOA have been doing everything to fuel the escalation and essentially incited it. They artificially created tension at international platforms, and this only provided Israel with additional impetus for radical steps and created the feeling of impunity with Israel. In the context of the current strikes by Israel, what we noticed is the information mass media about the fact that there was likely coordination between Israel and British special services. Immediately after the Israeli strikes, they sheltered the Israeli aviation which participated in the strikes in their bases in Cyprus. We also noticed a statement made by Israel when they said that they warned about their attacks. They warned Germany, JCPOA participant, and Italy. It also came to the fore that our American colleagues also had information about the strikes. Israeli strikes were also supported by the French, who clearly knew about them beforehand. And we will not be surprised here if the members of this group of like-minded states will start condemning Iran for their actions, which they undertook fully in line with Article 51 of the Charter. We are following very closely the current situation with the IAEA Secretariat. The life and health of its personnel has been threatened by the Israeli military adventure, and we expect that the Director General of the agency is going to provide us with objective assessment and analysis of developing situations, including from the viewpoint of radiological consequences. Madam President, the unprovoked attacks against the territory of sovereign Iran, the targeted strikes on the peaceful nuclear facilities cannot be justified in any way. The international community cannot and should not stand idly by when such a provocation presents itself, and tolerating such actions is a sure way to large-scale war and a serious threat to global security. We're convinced that the Security Council has to provide an unequivocal legal and political assessment of what's been done by Israel, and also call for an immediate halt to any kind of pressure by force and for a rejection of practice of unilateral military steps. We need to support any and all diplomatic efforts aimed at de-escalation and the return to negotiations. Let me underscore yet once again that settling issues having to do with the Iranian nuclear program is only possible if a peaceful political and diplomatic pathway is followed. No forceful resolution can be either legitimate nor viable here. By the way, let me say that the United States themselves have stated this repeatedly when they explained their readiness to continue with negotiations. Russia remains committed to strengthening international law, abiding by the UN Charter, and finding solutions which exclude further sliding of the region towards a new destructive war. And we are ready to work with all those who will advocate diplomacy and who will be looking for peaceful means to resolve differences. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I wish to extend my appreciation to you for your prompt response in convening this urgent meeting. which underscores the gravity of the situation before us. I thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their insightful briefing. From the outset of the mandate of Algeria on this Council, we have consistently warned against the growing danger of a broad regional conflagration, fueled by a spiral of illegal acts and multiple provocations of Israel. The events of today sadly confirm the validity of those warnings. We are now faced again with the serious and deliberate act of aggression. The Israeli army have launched coordinated strikes on the territory of Iran, targeting both military and civilian infrastructure. These actions are not only unprovoked and unjustifiable, they constitute a flagrant violation of international law, a violation of the Charter of the United Nations. As clearly articulated in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat of or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner and consistent with the purposes of the United Nations. The logic of unilateral force, of so-called preemptive strikes outside any legal mandate cannot be normalized and cannot be tolerated within this Council. Once again, these attacks prove that the only thing that preemptive action could prevent is peace. So the justifications presented by Israeli officials are unacceptable. They are flawed, especially since they come from a UN member that continues to operate outside the framework of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that is not fully under the IAEA nuclear safeguards regime, and which has persistently refused to join the negotiation process related to the establishment of a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. In its communiqué published this morning, the IAEA recalls the numerous General Conference resolutions on the topic of military attacks against nuclear facilities, providing that any armed attacks, I quote, any armed attack or and a threat against nuclear facility devoted to peaceful purposes constitutes a violation of the principle of the United Nations Charter, a violation of the international law and the status of the agency. Furthermore, the IAEA has consistently underlined that armed attacks on nuclear facilities could result on radioactive releases with grave consequences within and beyond the boundaries of the state which has been attacked. Colleagues, let us overlook the timing. Let us not overlook the timing. These attacks occurred precisely as Iran and the United States, with the facilitation of Oman, are engaged in indirect negotiation regarding Iran's nuclear program. A sixth round of discussion was due to take place this weekend in Muscat. The question must be asked about these attacks. Why now? Madam President, the use of force without Security Council authorization, absent a legitimate claim of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter, undermines the very foundation of the international legal order that this body, the Security Council, was created to uphold. It is an act completely divorced from any legal ground, but does not come to the surprise of anyone in this chamber. Yes, the Israeli acts like if international law does not exist, or simply it does not apply to them. Israel is sowing chaos throughout the region, throughout the Middle East. Its conduct is unworthy of a member of the United Nations. We are witnessing a repeated act of aggression, the bombing of the Lebanese capital, the occupation of new territories in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, and repeated violation of Syrian sovereignty, including abduction of civilians, as occurred just yesterday. In Gaza, Israel is using starvation as a method of warfare, in clear violation of international humanitarian law. A genocide is unfolding before our eyes, before your eyes. This is the behavior of a rogue state, and yet some still wonder why the Middle East remains so dangerously unstable. Madam President, the international community cannot allow a precedent to take hold whereby Israel acts as a judge and a jury, launching unilateral attacks in violation of established legal norms. Such course of action would erode the credibility of the Security Council and diminish the authority of the United Nations Charter itself. We must reaffirm clearly and collectively that the principles enshrined in the Charter are not optional. They are binding obligations. The prohibition of the use of force and the respect of sovereignty of member states are the pillars upon which our international system is built. We further reiterate that right must prevail over might. No political objective, no matter of strategic, can justify actions that defy the legal order upon which peace among nations depends. Let us be clear. Upholding international law is not a choice. It is a duty under all circumstances and without exception. Without exception. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President, for convening this important and urgent meeting. I also thank Director General Grossi and USG DiCarlo for their significant briefings regarding Israel's ongoing attacks and their impact. The Republic of Korea is gravely concerned about the escalating and deepening conflict in the Middle East. We condemn all actions that plunge the region into an extremely dangerous situation. We are deeply alarmed by Israel's announcement that its targeted operation will continue for as many days as it takes to eliminate the Iranian threat. Although it appears that the strikes were directed at military sites and personnel, including nuclear facilities and missile factories, it is highly troubling that reports indicate they have already resulted in many civilian casualties. As Director General Grossi pointed out, attacks on nuclear facilities could also result in radioactive releases with potential grave consequences on the lives and safety of the people across the region. We support the IAEA's commitment to ensuring nuclear safety, security, and its safeguards mandate in all circumstances. Iran's retaliation risks further escalation in a region already scarred by years of violence and destruction. The Council has consistently warned against the spillover effects of such conflicts. A full-scale war would serve no one in the world. We therefore urge both parties to exercise maximum restraint and refrain from any actions that could lead to further escalation. Another cycle of violence and retaliation must be avoided. We believe both countries possess the wisdom to avert a broader conflict that the region can hardly afford, and that a narrow but vital window for diplomacy still remains to pull back from the brink of all-out conflagration. Madam President, as a country neighboring another that is seriously violating non-proliferation obligations, the Republic of Korea shares serious concerns over Iran's continued expansion of its nuclear program, including the accelerated production of highly enriched uranium. In light of the expiration of UN Resolution 2231 this October, we have consistently urged Iran to fully cooperate with the IAEA in its monitoring and verification activities under the NPT Safeguards Agreement. However, yesterday, the IAEA Board of Governors adopted a resolution declaring Iran's non-compliance with its non-proliferation obligations for the first time in 20 years. Under this backdrop, the current crisis underscores the urgent need to reach a robust agreement that ensures the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. Without such a resolution, a vicious cycle of armed attack and retaliation may persist, driving the region into even deeper turmoil and instability. We once again call for immediate de-escalation and a renewed push toward a diplomatic solution. The Republic of Korea firmly opposes any steps that further inflame tensions in the region. Pursuing a military solution may produce short-term visible effect, but in the mid to long term, they will only further deepen and entrench the instability and insecurity in the Middle East. We urge all parties to exercise the utmost restraint and urgently return to diplomacy. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, allow me to express my gratitude for swiftly convening this important meeting today. I also would like to thank USG DiCarlo and Director Grossi for their comprehensive briefing on the grave developments unfolding in the Middle East. Madam President, Somalia is gravely concerned by the escalating confrontation between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Israel, especially in the light of recent reports regarding Israeli airstrikes on Iran and Iran's subsequent actions. These developments represent a dangerous turning point with serious implications not only for the two countries involved, but for the entire region and the world. We are gravely concerned by the airstrikes against Iran and call for full respect of its sovereignty, territorial integrity, in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. The use of force against a sovereign nation, regardless of the justification, risks undermining the foundational principles of international law and further destabilizing global peace and security. While we recognize the right to self-defense enshrined in Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, we call for restraint and de-escalation of the situation. The spillover effects are no longer hypothetical, and their consequences are already painfully clear, threatening to deepen existing crises and endanger countless lives in the Middle East. Madam President, at this critical juncture, my delegation calls for diplomacy, restraint, and meaningful dialogue to resolve the conflict. We urge both parties to refrain from further escalation and to prioritize peaceful engagement, wisdom, and stewardship. The international community must work collectively to de-escalate tensions and facilitate conditions for a durable peace. The Security Council has a clear mandate to uphold international peace and security. We call on all members to act with unity and resolve to support an immediate cessation of hostilities and return to dialogue and diplomacy. Lasting peace in the Middle East can only be achieved through addressing the root causes of instability in the region and the respect for international law. In conclusion, Madam President, Somalia reaffirmed its solidarity with all those affected by this conflict and stands with the global community in urging a return to diplomacy and full adherence to international law and its covenant, including the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Panama.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like to express our thanks to Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and to Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Rafael Grossi, for their presentations, and we welcome the delegations of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Israel, Iraq, and Kuwait. We're meeting here today at a moment of extreme gravity for international peace and security.
El galardonado escritor colombiano
Gabriel García Márquez
formuló como título de una de sus obras una genial, ya clásica expresión cuando calificó una situación previsible como crónica de una muerte anunciada. Resulta aplicable a esta circunstancia. Los hechos ocurridos anoche difícilmente debieron sorprendernos.
really are hardly surprising, but they do represent a new and troubling link in a chain of tension that threatens regional and global stability. It is especially alarming that these events are taking place in a region marked by deep sensitivities with regard to security and proliferation. The proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons, represents an existential threat that this Council cannot ignore. The Republic of Panama, as a country firmly committed to international law and to global stability, has consistently called for the strengthening of the global non-proliferation regime, and we underscore the irreplaceable role that is played by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, in this collective effort. And we also reaffirm that the full respect for and the integrity and safety of IAEA personnel is an obligation under international law and an indispensable requirement to preserve the credibility of the multilateral verification system. Our position is based on the fundamental principles of our foreign policy: respect for and strengthening of the multilateral system, the non-proliferation regime, and the promotion of diplomatic dialogue as an essential tool to ease tensions and reduce strategic risks. We take note of the report of the IAEA Director General, reference number GOV/2025/24, recently circulated to the members of this Council, where it's indicated that the agency's verification and monitoring related to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, have been severely affected by Iran's cessation of its compliance with nuclear commitments. Furthermore, we are closely following the discussions of the IAEA Board of Governors, in which a resolution was adopted yesterday, the 12th of June, in Vienna, a resolution stating that the Islamic Republic of Iran is in breach of its obligations under its safeguards agreement with the agency. Unfortunately, the information available to now with regard to the facts and motivations does not still allow us to know the practical scope of this non-compliance and the derived effects from this, and also does not allow us to distill conclusions from this information. Therefore, for the moment,
en cualquier caso,
in any event,
ni el Consejo de Seguridad de las Naciones Unidas
parties nor
debe
the United
permitir
Nations
que
should
estos acontecimientos
allow
arrastren a la
these
región
events
hacia un
to drag
conflicto de
the
mayor
region
alcance
into
que
a
contravenga
broader
los principios de la
conflict
Carta de
which
las
would
Naciones
contravene
Unidas
the
y del
principles of the
derecho
United Nations
internacional.
Charter and international
Debemos
law.
actuar con la mayor
We must
urgencia y
act with the
responsabilidad para
utmost
evitarlo.
urgency and
Panamá pide
responsibility to prevent this.
urgentemente la máxima
Panama
moderación
urgently
de todos los
calls for
estados,
maximum restraint
respeto
from
del
all
derecho
states,
internacional
respect for
y de los
international law,
principios
and for the
consagrados en la
principles
Carta de las
enshrined
Naciones
in the
Unidas,
United
y
Nations
a
Charter,
abstenerse de
and for
cualquier acción
refraining from any
unilateral
action
que
that
pueda escalar las tensiones.
could escalate
Hacemos un
tensions.
llamado urgente a la
We
revitalización de los
urgently
canales
appeal for the
diplomáticos como
revitalization
vía
of
para
diplomatic
reducir
channels
tensiones y
as a
mitigar
path to
riesgos
reduce
que
tensions and
podrían tener
mitigate risks
consecuencias
that could
irreparables
have
para la
irreparable
seguridad
consequences for international
Recordamos
security.
también que el derecho
We also
internacional
would recall that
exige la protección
international
de la
law
infraestructura
requires the
civil con
protection of
especial
civilian
énfasis en las
infrastructure
instalaciones
with
nucleares
special emphasis
con
on
fines
nuclear facilities intended for peaceful purposes.
bienes de carácter
Civilian
civil que deben ser
assets that
protegidos
must be
contra ataques y
protected from
represalias
attacks
por su
and
propia
reprisals
naturaleza
due to their very
y por los
nature
posibles
and
riesgos
because of the potential
catastróficos
risks
al
that
medio
they
ambiente y a
pose
poblaciones
to the
civiles.
environment and civilian
No hay atajo
populations.
militar
There
a la
is no
estabilidad.
military shortcut to
Solo el
stability.
diálogo genuino,
Only genuine,
inclusivo y
inclusive and
sostenido
sustained dialogue
puede ofrecer
can
una
offer a
salida
lasting
duradera
way out of the
a las crisis
crises
que hoy
that
nos
bring us
convocan.
here today.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank you for convening this emergency meeting of the Security Council. At the outset, Sierra Leone unequivocally deplores the unlawful use of force in contravention of the Charter of the United Nations. We deeply regret the seeming reversion to a period when a state can unilaterally resort to the use of force against another state in clear breach of the Charter and international law without consequence. For small states, this is deeply troubling, a deeply troubling trend which poses grave risk to international peace and security and must be firmly rejected. Turning to our agenda, I thank Under Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Rafael Grossi for their important briefing. We express grave alarm over the recent report of military strikes by the State of Israel against the territory of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including strikes on or near sensitive nuclear facilities, including the main Natanz nuclear facility. We are deeply troubled by the loss of life, as according to report, the strikes killed senior Iranian officials, nuclear scientists, and civilians. This development represents a dangerous escalation at a time when the Middle East is already facing multiple and overlapping crises. The region, in our view, is at a precipice, and this moment calls for restraint, responsibility, and diplomacy. We note with deep concern the letter dated 13 June 2025 from the Permanent Representative of Iran, issued as document S/2025/379, which brings to the attention of the Council very serious report of violations of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran. Any such use of force, especially across international borders, raises significant concerns under international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. We are further troubled by the potential implications of military operations affecting nuclear facilities. As Director General Grossi of IAEA has previously cautioned, any military action targeting or threatening nuclear facilities poses severe risk to human lives, the environment, and regional security. Attacks on nuclear installations could have catastrophic consequences far beyond the region. Sierra Leone fully aligns with the call by the UN Secretary General for de-escalation, dialogue, and the exercise of maximum restraint. This is a time for diplomacy, not confrontation. We urge all parties to step back from the edge and to recommit to diplomatic channels as the only viable path towards durable peace and stability. Madam President, the Middle East has long been plagued by cycles of conflict and mistrust. But history has also shown that bold diplomacy, even in the most difficult moment, can yield hope. We therefore call for an immediate cessation of hostile actions and urge the revival of regional and international efforts aimed at de-escalation and mutual security assurances. In this regard, Sierra Leone reiterates its long-standing position that the only path to lasting peace in the region lies in good faith negotiation based on international law and the principles of the UN Charter. We reaffirm the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states in the region and underscore the need to avoid provocations and retaliatory measures that may trigger wider regional conflagration. We also express our support for the important work of the IAEA in monitoring nuclear programs and ensuring peaceful use of nuclear energy. The independence and impartiality of the agency must be respected by all member states. In this critical time, full cooperation with the IAEA is essential to prevent further erosion of trust and to safeguard against nuclear proliferation. The international community cannot afford to allow further escalation. The cost in human life, environmental degradation, economic disruption, and regional instability will be incalculable. This is a moment of truth for this Council to assert its collective responsibility in upholding peace and security. Therefore, we call on global leaders and states with influence to emphasize the need for non-military approaches at this time and to promote dialogue, particularly through the IAEA, as the international technical institution entrusted with overseeing the peaceful use of nuclear energy. We reaffirm the Security Council's responsibility to promote de-escalation and preserve international peace and security through peaceful and lawful means. We call on all members of the Council to work constructively towards a consensus response that reaffirms our shared commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, especially the peaceful resolution of dispute. In closing, Madam President, Sierra Leone urges all concerned parties to take a step back, to de-escalate, and to return to the table of dialogue. The world is watching, and history will judge the choices to be made in this defining moment. Finally, on the broader question of peace in the Middle East, Sierra Leone expresses its regret over the announcement of the postponement of the planned high-level conference on Palestine and the two-state solution as a result of the recent strikes. We hope that the conference will be reconvened at the earliest opportunity and as a crucial step towards advancing a just and lasting peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of China.
President, I thank you for convening this emergency open meeting and for the briefings by Director General Grossi and Under-Secretary General DiCarlo. Early this morning, Israel launched large-scale attacks on multiple targets in Iran, causing damage to Iran's nuclear facilities and casualties. The Israeli side said that Israeli military operations would last for several days. China condemns Israel's actions that violate Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, opposes the intensification of tensions and expansion of conflicts, and is deeply concerned about the potential grave consequences of the Israeli operations. The abrupt heating up of the region serves no one's interests. We urge Israel to immediately cease all military adventurism, avoid further escalating tensions, and call on all relevant parties to abide by the UN Charter and international law, resolve disputes through political and diplomatic means, and jointly maintain regional peace and stability. China is seriously concerned about the negative impact of the current developments on the diplomatic negotiations on Iranian nuclear issue. China has always been committed to peacefully resolving the Iranian nuclear issue through dialogue and negotiation. We oppose the use of force and illegal unilateral sanctions and oppose armed attacks on peaceful nuclear facilities. As an NPT signatory, Iran's right to the peaceful uses of nuclear energy should be fully respected. President, for some time now, conflicts in the Middle East have dragged on, and the regional situation has remained highly tense. Gaza has been subjected to prolonged attacks and blockades, with over 2 million people trapped in an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. The international community should work together to promote a ceasefire in Gaza, de-escalate the regional situation, and effectively curb the spread of conflict. Countries with significant influence over Israel should practically play a constructive role. The Security Council should make full use of all the means conferred to it by the Charter to ensure the implementation of its relevant resolutions and to play its due role in maintaining regional peace and security. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me also thank Under Secretary General DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for your briefings. Colleagues, we meet at a critical moment for regional and international peace and security. As we speak, the situation in the Middle East is once again at the top of our agenda. The risk of escalation and regional destabilization is deeply worrying and something that requires our greatest attention. It is now time for all actors to show utmost restraint, to prioritize the safety and well-being of their people, to choose dialogue over confrontation. Madam President, Denmark's position is clear. Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. For years, Iran has continued to undertake activities in blatant violation of the JCPOA. Its production and accumulation of highly enriched uranium had reached unprecedented levels. Its nuclear enrichment capability and its operations continue to expand. It is very disturbing that the IAEA is unable to provide assurances that the Iranian nuclear program is exclusively peaceful because Iran is not fulfilling its legally binding safeguards obligations. These activities constitute a threat to international peace and security and a threat to the global non-proliferation regime. Yesterday's IAEA resolution clearly demonstrated this dangerous course of action. Still, we strongly believe that diplomacy must prevail. We have supported the talks between Iran and the United States on the status of Iran's nuclear program. We strongly urge Iran to engage in this dialogue in good faith. Madam President, in this current climate, we stress the importance of avoiding serious consequences in terms of a nuclear accident, which would be nothing short of devastating. This is not true only for Iran, but far beyond its borders. We urge all parties to abide by their obligations under the UN Charter and international law, including avoiding any steps that could lead to a potential radioactive release. Let me also use this occasion to express our full support for the IAEA and its verification and monitoring of Iran's nuclear program and its reporting. The involvement of the IAEA remains essential. Madam President, in closing, let me reiterate the urgency of de-escalation at this moment. For a region already grappling with too much crisis and conflict, a cycle of retaliation would only worsen the situation and risk plunging the Middle East further into conflict. This must be avoided. We call for a recommitment to diplomacy over discord, for the courage to reduce tensions, to step back from this dangerous brink. Denmark stands ready to support any and all efforts to this end, to find a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue through a negotiated political solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Under Secretary General DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for the informative and timely briefings. Madam President, the situation in Iran and the Middle East is still unfolding. There is a dangerous moment, and any further military escalation in the Middle East and beyond should be avoided. We are particularly concerned at the escalation in the region, while talks between Iran and the United States on Iran's nuclear program were underway. Allow me to make two brief points. First, we call on both sides to immediately de-escalate, show maximum restraint, and avoid retaliation. The international community must be immediately engaged to prevent a regional conflagration using all available diplomatic and dialogue channels. We are closely monitoring the situation and reiterate our strong commitment to regional security. Greece has repeatedly expressed its strong concern over the Iranian nuclear program and stressed that Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. In this context, we reaffirm Israel's right to protect itself and to assure its security. At the same time, we strongly believe that lasting security can only be achieved through diplomacy and in a negotiated deal. A diplomatic resolution of the crisis is now urgent for the sake of the region's stability and global security. We stand ready to support, both bilaterally and through international organizations, all diplomatic efforts and prioritize a return to talks on Iran's nuclear program held by the United States. Second, we reiterate the need to respect international law and international humanitarian law. It is essential to uphold the UN Charter as regards the use of force, as well as the integrity of the global non-proliferation regime. We recall the obligation of UN member states to act in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. It is also of the utmost importance to ensure that civilians do not find themselves in the crossfire, especially given the nuclear aspect of the evolving crisis. As our Foreign Minister has recently stated in this chamber, and I quote, "The protection of civilians is not optional. It is a legal obligation under international humanitarian law and a moral imperative we cannot afford to neglect." We call upon all parties to respect international humanitarian law in all circumstances, and we call upon all member states to use their influence to ensure all parties respect for it, unquote. Madam President, in closing, let me repeat in the strongest possible terms that now more than ever, a diplomatic resolution is the only option. It is our only hope for peace and security in the region and beyond. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. We would like to also join colleagues in thanking Director General Grossi and Under Secretary General DiCarlo for their briefings. Madam President, Pakistan strongly condemns unjustified and illegitimate aggression by Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Pakistan stands in resolute solidarity with the brotherly people of Iran. We offer our sympathies and condolences on the loss of life and damages due to these heinous attacks. The Israeli military strikes violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran and clearly contravene the UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. We unequivocally denounce these blatant provocations, which constitute a grave danger and a serious threat to the peace, security, and stability of the entire region and beyond, with serious implications. Iran has the right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Madam President, these attacks follow a dangerous pattern of Israeli irresponsible conduct marked by ongoing military operations in Gaza and repeated cross-border strikes in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, demonstrating a consistent and deliberate disregard for international norms. Israel's actions in the Middle East reflect a continuing pattern of unilateral militarism in flagrant violation of Article 2(4) of the UN Charter and represent acts of aggression as defined under General Assembly Resolution 3314 of 1974. Israel's serial breaches of sovereignty normalize impunity, erode the authority of the United Nations, and gravely undermine the international order. Such blatant aggression and contempt for international law has already had devastating consequences. In Gaza, tens of thousands of civilians have been killed as a result of Israeli military onslaught, and a humanitarian catastrophe has unfolded under an illegal blockade that has in fact been there for over 15 years. In Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon, Israeli airstrikes have repeatedly targeted sovereign territory, undermining regional stability and exacerbating tensions. The fact that these attacks against Iran have happened in the middle of a negotiations process aimed at finding a peaceful diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue makes it all the more morally repugnant and against international norms. These actions risk eroding the trust and sanctity of the negotiations process, so crucial for the peaceful settlement of these issues. Madam President, Pakistan reaffirms its support for the resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue through peaceful means, diplomatic engagement, and sustained dialogue. The JCPOA was an outcome of painstaking and arduous yet constructive negotiations. It charted a roadmap to comprehensively address the concerns of the parties involved by clearly defining their relevant obligations and responsibilities. The illegal use of force against Iran and the ensuing situation are likely to frustrate the ongoing diplomatic efforts and could destabilize a region that is already under very severe stress. The ongoing diplomatic contacts to reach a negotiated deal and other endeavors to promote regional peace and security must not be allowed to be appended. It is highly regrettable that these attacks have happened when the IAEA was continuing its verification activities in Iran. Such actions threaten the IAEA's technical work, which should be supported and not disrupted. Israel has violated international law, IAEA statute, and several IAEA resolutions by attacking the IAEA safeguarded facilities. In addition to serious violation of international law, these attacks risk setting a dangerous negative precedent and pose a grave threat to safety of populations in the region and around the globe. Pakistan, as an immediate neighbor of Iran, is therefore seriously concerned. Security Council Resolution 487 strongly affirmed such attacks as a clear violation of the UN Charter, the norms of international conduct, and a serious threat to the entire IAEA safeguard regime. We call on all parties, Madam President, to fulfill their respective obligations and responsibilities and avoid escalation. Even in these testing times, diplomatic engagement and dialogue must be prioritized. Clearly, the international community is in favor of peace and stability in the region. In a few days, next week, the international community, the UN membership, was to come together to express its will to chart the path for the Palestinian state as part of the two-state solution that would usher in the long-awaited, just, and durable peace in the Middle East. Israel's reckless and irresponsible behavior cannot be allowed to jeopardize the efforts for peace, endanger the stability of the entire region, and risk wider escalation, thereby threatening global peace and security. The Security Council bears primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security and to stop this aggression immediately. It must hold the aggressor accountable for its actions. This Council must deny Israel the free hand and the impunity with which it continues to operate in defiance of international law and international opinion. It is also our collective responsibility to reject any notions by anyone, anywhere, that seek to distort, misuse, and abuse the right of self-defense in violation of international law and the UN Charter. Finally, this Council must collectively muster the courage to take positions and adopt decisions that are in full conformity with the Charter of the United Nations. In accordance with its responsibility, the Council should encourage, support, and prioritize dialogue and diplomacy to advance peaceful resolution of conflicts. That is the only viable path forward, as many around the table have also echoed in their comments. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and I'd like to start by thanking USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. President, the Security Council meets today at a dangerous moment. We are deeply concerned by Israel's strikes on sites in Iran, as well as the Iranian military action we've already seen in response. There is a clear risk that this crisis escalates, with serious implications for peace and security across the region and beyond. This is in no one's interests. Colleagues, our first priority must be to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. We urge all parties to urgently step back, show restraint, and reduce tensions. The UK did not participate in this action. And let me say clearly and unequivocally that Russia's claim that British sovereign bases on the island of Cyprus were in any way involved is nonsense. It is deeply irresponsible at moments like this for Russia to be spreading disinformation. We firmly support any diplomatic efforts to return to stability. Today, we have spoken to Israel at the highest levels, and our Foreign Secretary has also spoken to Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. We have urged both sides to show restraint and de-escalate tensions. We continue to engage partners across the region to ensure we are collectively doing our utmost to push for a peaceful outcome. The UK, in partnership with the E3, has always championed a diplomatic solution to address Iran's nuclear escalation, which has no credible civilian justification. We will not be deterred from this. As my Prime Minister said today, we have long held concerns about Iran's nuclear program, as documented by the IAEA. Israel also needs to protect its people and security. It is therefore in the interests of all actors to stop military confrontation and pursue a negotiated solution. President, this is time for a strong, united position from members of this Council. We must take urgent action to de-escalate and provide an opportunity for a return to diplomacy. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by thanking Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their valuable contributions to today's discussion. Madam President, Slovenia is deeply concerned with the overnight and today's developments that threaten to destabilize an already very fragile state of affairs in the Middle East. We express our deepest concern with the Israeli strikes on Iran and Iran's response. We condemn any military escalation in the region. Madam President, Israeli attacks on nuclear installations in Iran come at a particularly volatile time. While talks between Iran and the United States on the status of Iran's nuclear program are underway. As both my President and the Prime Minister have said, these negotiations have sparkled a glimmer of hope to reach a deal that would be of substantial importance not only for the region, but for the whole international community. Slovenia remains concerned with the size and unclear nature of Iran's nuclear program. We have zero tolerance for proliferation of nuclear weapons. Moreover, our concerns are deeper by the fact that the IAEA still cannot confirm the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. However, for us, strikes against civilian infrastructure, whether they happen in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, or anywhere else, are unacceptable. Time and time again, Slovenia has cautioned against military action on Iran's nuclear program. There is only one legitimate option, and Slovenia remains confident that there is only a political solution to the issue. With this in mind, Slovenia calls on Iran and the US to prioritize a peaceful solution and continue their talks in Muscat. Madam President, lasting and robust security is built upon diplomacy, not military action. I join the Secretary General's call on both sides to show maximum restraint. Watching footage from the ground, it is clear the time to de-escalate is now, immediately. A descent into deeper conflict must be avoided at all costs. The region, and indeed the world, cannot afford it. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for her briefing, and I give the floor now to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General Rafael Grossi, for your briefing. Yesterday, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran's regime has, since its founding, repeatedly called for the State of Israel's eradication, launched unprovoked, direct, and proxy attacks on Israeli civilians, and spread terror, instability, and untold human suffering throughout the region. As we speak, Iran is firing missiles at civilian areas across Israel, including in Tel Aviv. As President Trump has repeatedly said, this dangerous regime cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Israel advised us this action was necessary for its self-defense. Every sovereign nation has the right to defend itself, and Israel is no exception. The United States was informed of the strikes ahead of time, but was not militarily involved in these strikes. Our absolute foremost priority is the protection of U.S. citizens, personnel, and forces in the region. As Secretary Rubio said, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. Let me be crystal clear. No government, proxy, or independent actor should target American citizens, American bases, or other American infrastructure in the region. The consequences for Iran would be dire. President Trump was elected with a sweeping mandate from the American people to advance peace and to avoid the grave mistakes of past administrations that led to forever wars. We seek a secure peace. As President Trump said, the violence should come to an end, and Iran should make a deal so that there is, quote, no more death, no more destruction, close quote. The United States will continue to seek a diplomatic resolution that ensures Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon or pose a threat to stability in the Middle East. Iran's leadership would be wise to negotiate at this time. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Tout d'abord, je souhaiterais remercier Madame la Secrétaire Générale adjointe pour les affaires politiques et Monsieur le Directeur Général de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie atomique pour leurs exposés de la situation. Madame la Présidente, à la suite des frappes menées cette nuit par Israël contre l'Iran, la France suit la situation avec la plus grande attention et elle exprime sa vive préoccupation au regard des développements. La France rappelle son attachement à la stabilité du Moyen-Orient et elle exhorte l'ensemble des parties à observer la plus grande retenue et à œuvrer en vue d'une désescalade. Le président de la République et le ministre de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères se sont entretenus ce matin avec leurs homologues dans la région et au-delà, auprès desquels ils ont passé le même message sur la nécessité de mettre un terme à l'escalade. L'engagement de la France en faveur de la diplomatie est constant aux côtés de ses partenaires
wavering
et en
alongside
étroite
its
coordination avec les
E3
États-Unis.
partners and in close coordination with the
C'est la
United States.
diplomatie qui doit maintenant
Diplomacy
prévaloir.
must
La
prevail
France se tient
now.
prête, en lien avec ses
We in France
partenaires,
stands ready
à
together with our
soutenir les
partners
efforts
to
visant à
support
réduire les
efforts
tensions.
aimed at
Et
reducing
nous
tension, and
réaffirmons,
we
comme l'a rappelé le président de la
reaffirm, as
République,
was recalled by the
le
President
droit
of the Republic,
d'Israël de se
the right of
protéger et
Israel
d'assurer
to
sa
protect
sécurité.
itself and ensure its security.
Madame la Présidente, la
Madam
France a
President,
maintes fois
France has
exprimé
many
ses
times expressed its
préoccupations face à
concern
l'escalade du
regarding
programme
the
nucléaire
escalation
escalation of the Iranian nuclear program. This escalation is a threat for the European security interests and for the peace and security internationally. Iran's nuclear weapon would threaten the stability of the region and would bring with it the risk of further escalation, proliferation. In April, under the presidency of Jean-Noël Barrot, France organized a Security Council meeting to highlight the shared interest of the international community to preserve the non-proliferation regime, which is a key element of our collective security. And this implies for Iran that it needs to uphold its commitments not to seek or acquire nuclear weapons and the need to fulfill its obligations. France, together with its European E3 partners, has engaged constantly in looking for a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear crisis and will continue doing the same. We've contributed to the negotiations of the 2015 agreement and towards its implementation and its preservation to date. Iran did not take up the numerous opportunities to return to the agreement. Iran continued the escalation of its nuclear program in violation of its obligations and commitments. The Iranian nuclear program has never been as advanced as it is today, and it lacks any credible civilian justification. The IAEA Director General is not in a position today where he would state that it's exclusively peaceful. And this week, on the basis of a comprehensive report, which is a technical and impartial assessment by the agency, the Board of Governors of the IAEA found that Iran is in violation of its safeguards obligations. In the recent days, Iran announced the increase in its enrichment capacities and the creation of a new infrastructure for that. And it continues its ballistic missile activities, which destabilize the region and can reach not just the region, but also European territory. It transfers drones and missiles to Russia for its war of aggression against Ukraine. France, together with partners, supports a diplomatic, credible, and lasting solution so as to address the legitimate concerns of the international community regarding the Iranian nuclear program. This solution has to be arrived at before the expiration of the Security Council Resolution 2231 in October. We once again call upon Iran to return to upholding its obligations and to commit itself to negotiations so as to avoid escalation and continued destabilization of the region. Madam President, our priority is to prevent regional conflagration and to continue with a diplomatic solution. France stands ready to work with all of its partners to promote de-escalation in the region. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Guyana. I thank Under Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Director General of the IAEA, Mr. Rafael Grossi, for their important briefings. Colleagues, Guyana is deeply concerned about the attack carried out by Israel against facilities in Iran. My delegation has noted the reports that the attack has resulted in the loss of lives, including civilians. It has also reportedly resulted in retaliatory drone strikes by Iran against Israel. Israel's latest attack on Iran contravenes the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. At a particularly volatile period in the region, the attack risks exacerbating existing tensions in the Middle East and escalating the ongoing crisis. Guyana is concerned about the recent military escalation in the region and calls for maximum restraint from member states. In a region that is becoming increasingly combustible with each passing day, we appeal for dialogue, diplomacy, and good sense to prevail, and for all parties to commit to no further military escalation in the region. Colleagues, Guyana reiterates its appeal to both Israel and Iran to exercise maximum restraint and to avoid any further maneuvers that could plunge the entire Middle East into further turmoil, or worse, result in a nuclear catastrophe. The world simply cannot afford any miscalculations. The consequences for civilians could be catastrophic. Guyana, therefore, urges both Israel and Iran to fully comply with their obligations under international law and relevant resolutions adopted by this Council. We further call on the two parties to uphold the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, to adhere fully to international law and the United Nations Charter, and to settle their differences peacefully. Guyana also stresses the importance of accountability for all violations of international law, and to avoid creating a culture of impunity for such actions. Finally, Guyana will act constructively to support any Security Council measure that is in keeping with its mandate aimed at preserving international peace and security. The Council must take a united approach to these developments to confront the prospects of outright war in a region and the devastating consequences that would follow for the region and beyond. The maintenance of international peace and security requires us all to take decisive action, and now is the moment to redouble our collective efforts to prevent a wider conflagration. I thank you. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Madam President, we extend our sincere congratulations to Guyana as assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, and we thank you for your coordination and for convening this urgent and important meeting. We appreciate Under Secretary General Ms. DiCarlo and Director General Mr. Grossi for their contribution to this meeting. We also wish to express our appreciation to Algeria, Pakistan, China, and the Russian Federation for their support in convening this emergency session to address Israel's unlawful act of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, a grave violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I address the Council today on behalf of the people and government of the Islamic Republic of Iran with the utmost urgency and grave alarm. Madam President, last night the Israeli regime, the most dangerous and terrorist regime in the world, with full intelligence and political support from the United States regime, conducted a series of coordinated and premeditated military attacks across multiple cities in Iran. These acts of aggression and unlawful strikes target peaceful nuclear facilities, military sites, vital civilian infrastructure, and residential areas. Among the key targets was the Natanz nuclear facility, a safeguarded site under the full monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Madam President, we strongly and unequivocally condemn the barbaric and criminal attack. A series of targeted assassinations were against senior military officials, nuclear scientists, and innocent civilians. So far, 78 people, including senior military officials, have been martyred and over 320 others injured. The overwhelming majority of them civilians, including women and children. Earlier today, Israel continued its act of aggression against Iran, once again targeting multiple civilian and military sites across several Iranian cities. These deliberate and systematic killings were not only illegal but inhuman, a chilling display of calculated aggression. These atrocities constitute clear act of state terrorism and flagrant violation of international law. Madam President, the inaction of the United Nations, the Security Council, and the IAEA, despite repeated and documented warning by Islamic Republic of Iran regarding Israeli threats against its nuclear sites, have seriously undermined the credibility and authority. Their silence in the face of repeated Israeli provocation has emboldened this rogue regime to escalate its violation and cross every red line. Let us be clear. This reckless attack on safeguarded nuclear facilities defied not only the fundamental principles of international law, but also basic common conscience. Any damage to these facilities risks catastrophic radiological consequences that would not be confined to Iran, but could spread across the region and beyond. Only a regime devoid of humanity and responsibility would endanger millions of lives in pursuit of its destructive ambitions. These actions stand in direct violation of numerous legal instruments, including the IAEA Statute, the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the Geneva Convention, and multiple Security Council and IAEA General Conference resolutions, all of which prohibit attacks or threats against nuclear facilities under safeguards. Above all, this aggression is a grave breach of the United Nations Charter, particularly Article 2, Paragraph 4, which prohibit the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any member state. Israel also violated Iraq's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Permanent Mission of Iraq today formally protested and condemned this violation of its territorial integrity in a letter to the Security Council and the Secretary General. Madam President, those who support this regime with the United States at the forefront must understand that they are complicit by aiding and enabling these crimes, by they share full responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and deliberate undermining of global peace and security. The Israeli regime's long-standing crimes against the oppressed Palestinian people, its repeated violation of the sovereignty of regional countries, and its possessions of undeclared weapons of mass destruction have made the Middle East a cauldron of chronic instability since its creation. It is long overdue for the international community to act. This regime must be disarmed of all weapon mass destructions, placed under international supervision, and held fully accountable. Madam President, this is not a regional issue. This is not merely an attack on one country. This is a direct assault on the international order, an attack on the Charter of the United Nations, the UN system, the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, as well as the authority of the IAEA. Israel's leadership, including its criminal prime minister, has shamelessly and publicly claimed responsibility for these heinous acts. Israeli officials say that this aggression aims to wreak nuclear talks. This confession alone is enough to reveal the real motive behind the attack: to kill diplomacy, to sabotage negotiation, and to drag the region into wider conflict. This leaves no room for denial. Furthermore, the aggression was intentional, coordinated, and fully backed by a permanent member of this Council, the United States. The United States' complicity in this terrorist attack is beyond doubt. The officials of the United States have expressly and brazenly confessed their willful aid and assistance in the crimes and gross violation that Israeli regime committed as of last night, including their deliberate transfer of arms. We will not forget that our people lost their lives as a result of the Israeli attacks with American weapons. These actions amount to declaration of war. They are the latest in a long and well-documented pattern of lawless, destabilizing, and aggressive behavior by the Israeli regime, a regime that acts with impunity because it is shielded by powerful allies. This must end. Madam President, the Security Council must act now, firmly and decisively. In 1981, this very Council responded unanimously to the Israeli military attack on Iraqi Osirak nuclear reactor by adopting Resolution 487, which unequivocally condemned the aggression as a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The Council also called on this criminal regime to refrain from any such acts or threats in the future. Had the Council enforced that resolution and held Israel accountable at that time, this regime would not have been emboldened to continue this unlawful behavior with impunity. The current aggression is a direct consequence of decades of inaction on double standards. Madam President, the Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its inherent right to self-defense as enshrined in Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran will respond decisively and proportionately to these acts of aggression at a time, in a place, and by means of its choosing. This is not a threat. This is the natural, legal, and necessary consequence of an unprovoked military attack. Iran's response will be firm, lawful, and essential to restore deterrence, defend our sovereignty, and uphold the principles of international law. No aggressor can be allowed to act with impunity. Madam President, we have requested this emergency meeting because we expect this Council to fulfill its Charter mandate. The Security Council must condemn, in the strongest possible term, Israeli unlawful aggression. It must take immediate, concrete measures to hold the Israeli regime accountable and to prevent the further corrosion of international peace and security. Anything less would signal to collapse of the international system and invite chaos. Let me conclude with a simple and undeniable truth. Israel attacked Iran. Israel violated international law and the UN Charter, and Israel must be held accountable. The Security Council must act now and stop this act of aggression immediately. Silence is complicity in this crime. I thank you.
Thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Madam President, first I would like to thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi. Madam President, Israel has acted to prevent its destruction, and the world now stands at a crossroad between denial and clarity. This is not only a defining moment for Israel, it is a defining moment for the global security order and for the credibility of the international system. As we speak, hundreds of ballistic missiles with conventional payloads are striking Israel's cities, neighborhoods, communities. They are striking population centers, not military bases, not Air Force bases, cities. Dozens are injured, 2 of them in a critical condition, and we are still following the news. Now take a moment and imagine if today that radical regime had nuclear warheads for those missiles. Last night, the State of Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a preemptive military operation carried out with precision, purpose, and the most advanced intelligence at our disposal. The mission was very clear: dismantle Iran's nuclear program, eliminate the architects of its terror and aggression, and neutralize the regime's ability to follow through on its repeated public promise to destroy the State of Israel. For years, Iran has declared its intent. Its leaders have spoken without hesitation. Less than a month ago,